Welcome to Get Moving TV. I'm Dr. Chris Landon, and I serve as your host. I'm looking at my career, at the passing of the baton on to others, and trying to consider, well, what would I do next? And so I, of course, reached to my friends and see how what they've done after their professional career. I've been quite fortunate to know Ed Staples. He's a research scientist. At one point I was at Rockwell International Science Center as a small child, and now it was interesting to run into him later. We're doing some mold research and got a great friendship going. And then Ed decided it was time to try something else. So Ed's joining me today. We're going to talk a little bit about retirement and what you did, and about boats, and then an extraordinary event that brings you here today. So welcome to Get Moving TV.
Thank you, Chris.
So, I was trying to, I'm looking at retirement and passing the baton on to the young people, and that's going to take a couple years, and trying to follow you and what you and your wife have done. I've remarried, and I know you just cruised down in Mexico, and trying to get my wife to not feel like the cartel is going to kidnap her and she's going to end up in a brothel in Saudi Arabia. That you were very kind and offered us a berth, a cabin of our own on your boat. But tell us how you made that transition. I really want to get kind of that arc after you sold your company.
Well, it was about 10 years ago. I sold my company, and then I sold my house and I moved on to my sailboat. And I met a wonderful woman named Annette, and she was a teacher. She was teaching at LA Unified, special education. She'd been doing it for over 30 years. We fell in love, as luck would have it, and we also remarried about 8 years ago, in 2008, and probably more than 8 years ago.
March 4th.
March 4th.
Not supposed to, that's the only active verb. And that's
March 4th, she always reminds me, March 4th, because it's the only day of the year that gives a command. So at that time, we both decided that we were ready to retire, and we wanted to do something, but we didn't want to just stay at home and do nothing. So we decided to enroll in a sailboat race that went from San Diego down to Mexico. And we thought we'd maybe go down for a few months. The race was called the Baja Jaja.
People dressed in pirate things and
yeah, it was a tongue-in-cheek kind of race. Everybody, you could either come in first, second, or everybody came in third. There were no further places than third. And it was a lot of fun. And it made 2 stops going down 1,200 miles. Both stops we had big beach parties. And you can imagine it was about 400 people. So it was a lot of fun, and it was a good, safe way to go, especially if you hadn't done that before, which we hadn't. And we thought we'd only be there for a few months. It turned out we've been sailing Mexico now for 8 years. 8 seasons we've gone down there. Our drill typically is, as retired people, is we spend half the year. We leave in October, which is the end of hurricane season. You don't want to go down in hurricane season. It's too hot and humid anyway. But starting in October, it's gorgeous. And we go down there in October, and we typically come home around July, June, somewhere in there, sometimes May. But that was the beginning of hurricane season, which starts on June 1st.
Well, and I've seen you spend the summer planning the boat and what should I redo the teak, and what should I get for the dinghy, and what new things should I get, and it's so much fun for my wife and myself to watch.
In the off season, we do a lot to fix the boat up. We buy things for it. We have people that take care of it. We leave it in Mexico. We don't bring it back. We come home and usually go visit our relatives in the summer, which live up in the far north. I have one son that lives in Buffalo, and the summer is a good time to visit Buffalo. You don't want to go there in the winter. So it made for a nice nice routine. We'd spend the winters in Mexico, the summers visiting our relatives, and then enjoying the beaches here at Channel Islands.
Well, I've remarried since, and so we were trying to persuade my wife that going to Mexico again wouldn't be a problem. And so here's this beautiful boat. Now, a number of years ago, about 4 years ago, you invited me down, and we saw museums, and we went kayaking, and just had a great time. Belinda Bay.
It's a wonderful place.
It's a wonderful place, and the cruisers themselves. You know, you're always seeing somebody, you're always talking to somebody. It seems like you have the morning radio show and the Baja Haha. I think as you were telling me, and I know Annette was reassured, there's always a boat in sight. You wouldn't be too far away from another boat and the like. So tell us more. You go to small villages. What do the cruisers do down there?
Cruisers do a lot of things. We are a close-knit group. You meet a lot of people, but it's like everyone is on the same highway. So we run into each other at faraway anchorages, could be all the way up in the Sea of Cortez. We've been as far south as El Salvador. We still run into cruisers. We have rallies. We have our annual parties at Christmas time, Super Bowl, these types of things, just like you have here. But there's really a lot of camaraderie between the cruisers. Now we go to a lot of times, like one of our favorite places is up in the Sea of Cortez, which is where you came and visited with us. There are many, many coves. It's a very remote region of the world. You'll find small villages, very small, maybe 10, 15 families. We always enjoy the schools. That's one of their favorite or most important buildings, if you will, in any village is the school. And they're amazing how clean and immaculate they are. And they may only have 4 or 5 students. And there'll be a teacher there, and we like to take them supplies, get to know them. Sometimes we'll try to repair equipment around the school. You know, give a little back to the schools.
Well, tell me about the Sandpiper. I remember seeing the name for the first time. So, what kind of?
Sandpiper is a 45-foot cutter-rigged sailboat, which means it has 2 head sails. It's really a cruiser. It's a full keel, big heavy boat, very sturdy, and it's our home. We live on that boat 6 months of the year, so we have basically tricked it out so that it has everything that we could think of, although we're always thinking of new things to add to it.
So when you pull into Belinda Bay, you can stay there for a week and kayak and fish and.
Yeah, we have water maker. We have more than enough fuel. We have all the things that you have at home. Some places we may be fortunate enough to have a cell tower in sight. If we get a cell tower, we can actually even get the internet. But we carry our own movies. We do have TV, but we don't get broadcast TV. We just use it for watching movies. And all the cruisers, we share the movies among each other.
We have I think some photos and pictures from your voyage. Tell me, can you describe a little the things with
well,
that you
there's
see there?
the Balandra Cove itself is a beautiful cove. If you look at it, you'll see that it's 7 or 8 beautiful white sand beaches with a crystal clear blue water. It's gorgeous. Another one of our favorite places is Isla Perdida. It has a different look to it. It actually separates 2 islands, one called Espiritu Santo from Isla Perdida. In the middle is a extinct volcano caldera, and that's the anchorage. That's where you actually anchor. When we go there, we like to hike up to the top of the volcano, the rim of the volcano. It's quite an exciting hike, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. It's hard to believe that God made such nice places, and there's nobody there because they've made it all a national park. So it's a beautiful spot. The water's warm. What's not to like?
Well, Well, unfortunately, my wife and I were going to join you this spring, and I had an airbag explode in my chest and cracked my sternum, so I couldn't tie my own shoes, and screamed all night. Didn't seem like I'd be a very good boat companion, so we reached you during one of those cell tower events there and just let you know that we're sorry and wouldn't make it. So how did that final voyage go? And then we'll get to the call I got from you when you finally made it back to the United States.
Well, when we went over to the Sea of Cortez this year in April, and in May, it was a short trip, but we went up into the Sea of Cortez and we visited some of our favorite places, including Balandra. And on May the 13th, we left La Paz, and the home port for Sandpiper is actually in Mazatlan, which is 200 miles on the other side across the Sea of Cortez. So when we go there, it's usually an all-night passage. You sail all day, all night, and all day to get across. So when we were heading back, we left La Paz in the morning, and the first little passage we make is 65 miles. We have to first go north. You can see on a map where we actually go north first. We go through a canal, looks like, between the island and the mainland, the Baja mainland. And then we go south through a passage called the Cerralvo Pass. That takes us to a little village called Bahia de los Sueños, Bay of Dreams. It had an old name in the old days. It was called Muertos, not because anybody really died there, but if you know what a dead man is, you probably don't. A dead man is what the old sailors used to bury in the ground so that they could, for moorings, to tie to the bigger ships. And this used to be a port where the big ships came in, and they had dead men all over the bay that they could tie up to. So they just called it Muertos. They now have a development there, so they changed the name to Bahia de los Sueños. It's a more romantic name.
I would say so.
So anyway, we left the next morning. We had a nice dinner, and we went to sleep, and we rested. It was a beautiful place to anchor. We left the next morning about 8 o'clock, and the weather report was fine. There was no wind, so it was a flat sea, so we were motoring. And the boat was doing beautiful on a flat sea. We were doing about 8 knots. And everything was fine until around noon. At noon, I had actually gone down below and was taking a little siesta. And I was getting up, and my wife was on watch, Annette was on watch in the cockpit. And she was looking down, and she said, "There's smoke." She saw smoke, little wisps of smoke. And she had heard a pop or something, and so I ran to the back of the boat, looked into the engine room. Everything was fine. But then I looked into the quarter berth, which is, we have 2 staterooms on this boat. Our stateroom, which is up forward, and then we have a quarter berth in the back, which would have been your bedroom.
Which would have been my bedroom.
Which would have been your bedroom.
Yes, I would have been siesting there with my wife.
Yeah, you might have been taking a siesta too.
I would say.
So when I looked in the quarter berth, there was a small fire at the base of the bed. And, so we immediately shut off the engine, disconnected all the electrical mains, in the off chance that maybe it was an electrical fire or something like that. The engine was fine. It was running beautifully. And the first thing you do is you grab a fire extinguisher. Well, we're back. I have 3 of them. Between the galley and the engine compartment, they're all right there. So I grabbed the fire extinguisher and put out the fire. It created a lot of powder. If you're familiar with fire extinguishers, this was, on boats they typically have marine fire extinguishers, and they're class B and C. and they're made for like engine fires, grease, oil, gasoline, or galley fires. Could be on a stove or something. And they work by suffocating the fire.
And you'd had fires, little fires on the boat
I had
before.
had a fire a couple of years before in one of my alternators. Caught fire, and you squirted it, you're done. It was electrical fire, but it wasn't a problem. This fire, we put it out. Unfortunately, these fire extinguishers also put out a carbonate powder, is how they work, and it's usually in an argon gas. But it suffocates the fire, but it puts out, between the smoke that comes out and all the powder from the fire extinguisher, it can suffocate you. In other words, you'll find you can't breathe. Well, initially I put out the fire and it was fine. We thought, oh, thank God it's out, because it was a small fire, maybe this much, and I've got some little inside pictures of the boat that you can see where the fire started. Now, after we put out the fire, you can see where the boat started to fill, the quarter berth at least, and the engine compartment began to fill with smoke. Smoke and this white powder. It wasn't but a minute, and the fire came back again, bigger than before. Now it was half the bed, so to speak. And we said, whoa. So grabbed the fire extinguisher, and we put it out again. This time I had a lot more smoke and a lot more of this powder, this suffocating powder. It was beginning to now fill a whole quarter berth and get into the boat and fill up the boat with this smoke and powder, and it was getting difficult to breathe. The fire came back a third time. Unfortunately, what was happening was it was not an oil fire or the type of thing where you could suffocate it. It was what's called a Class A fire, which if you don't remove the heat, the fire keeps coming back. Unfortunately, it was a knee-jerk reaction to grab the extinguishers because they're right there and you use them. When I use it that next time, now there was so much smoke and so much powder you couldn't breathe at all. And we tried making some wet cloths. My wife wet some cloths, and she thought I went up top to get some air, because you had to go up top, get air, and then hold your breath and come back down to try to fight the fires. She tried breathing, and that didn't work. It just, she come up sputtering and she couldn't breathe. We tried one more time and putting out the fire, and there was just so much smoke and everything. And then the last fire extinguisher, we pulled it, and it didn't work for some reason. And we had checked all the extinguishers before we left La Paz, but one of them failed. At that point, we couldn't stay down below. The fire was now, the quarter berth was almost fully engulfed. We went up to the cockpit, and as we went up, the fire is starting to come up even the companionway. And so we knew pretty much it was lost. We have a life raft and I have a dinghy, both. And we immediately jumped onto the ropes and started releasing those. The flames came up, at that time they were coming up the companionway. When they hit the Dodger, which is canvas, and then there's a Bimini, which is more canvas, and then there's like curtains down that are sunscreens. It was like an explosion. The whole top of the boat, cockpit, and all of that exploded in flames. And it really was like an explosion, so much so that from just that one event, both of us received second and third degree flash burns from that ignition. At that point, it really was just like an explosion. All we could do is we fell off, we went into the water. We had no choice. We didn't have time for life vests. We didn't get the dinghy and the life raft. Both are now in flames. The dinghy exploded just from the heat, you know. And all we could do is just go in the water. Now we're floating in the water, looking up, and the boat's burning like a Roman candle. The mast hadn't fallen yet. It eventually did, and we saw it go down. But at that point, we're looking up, and I'm still knowing that we need some type of flotation. I'm trying to pull on the ropes for the dinghy to see if I can get it to fall into the water. Eventually, what happened, the flames were so intense, they burn off the ropes holding the dinghy. It fell into the water in flames. It's burning. The life raft was already toast. It was already burning. There were 2 fenders on the very back of the boat, and you can see these in one of the pictures. The 2 fenders, the ropes burn off, and they fell into the water. And they still had plenty of air because they were shielded from the direct flames. We grabbed those, and we grabbed the dinghy, what was left of it. No, you couldn't row the dinghy. All the flotation, it was what's called a rib, a rigid inflatable boat. The bottom was solid, but both pontoons had already exploded, and they were in flames. And so we splashed water on that, got the flames out, because I had a gas can sitting there, 6 gallons of gas for the outboard motor. I didn't want that to go off, and I didn't want to lose the dinghy, even though it was only pieces were left. So I jettisoned that, undid the ropes and jettisoned the gas can, and we were able to, there was just one little part of a pontoon that had some air in it, and so I grabbed that, grabbed our 2 floats that we had, and we started paddling away from the boat to get away from the boat, which at that time, now we're starting to hear propane tanks explode, gasoline, not gas, but diesel fuel. The fuel tanks are all starting to go. Yeah, I didn't want to get too close.
Do you have a oar, 2 floats, and
We got an oar out of. Initially, we kind of looked at ourselves. My wife looked at me and she said, "This is a fine mess you got me in, Ollie."
This isn't the Baja Haha where you're surrounded by boats. You haven't seen a boat.
No, there was no boat. We were 40 miles
40
offshore.
miles out to shore.
5,000 feet of water.
No life vest.
No life vest.
The
nothing.
Emergency signal that was designed to
No
go off when it hit
all
water.
our EPIRBs, all the we had lots of safety gear. We had at least 3 EPIRBs, emergency beacons. They're all up in flames. We had man overboard poles. We had life vests in triplicate. All of that was up in flames. It happened by the time when we first noticed the smoke, and by the time we were in the water was less than 5 minutes. It all happened so fast. One thing I've heard firemen since then say that fires typically double every 7 seconds. I think they're right. I would agree with that.
We've got about 3 minutes left. I got a call when I was in San Francisco giving a lecture.
Yep.
Oh, Chris, we're back, and do you know a plastic surgeon? So, wow, tell us about the rescue in the last couple of minutes.
Well,
here.
the guy, we were lucky after about 90 minutes of treading water, I was able to rig the fenders a little bit. In fact, I tied one to my wife's wrist so that she wouldn't go down. She was starting to suffer shock and hypothermia. Even though the water was relatively warm, you still get hypothermia after an hour and a half. We saw a boat come over the horizon, and
you were up in the wave. She was up in the wave.
Waves
There's a
would make
speck out there somewhere.
Yeah. You know, I said, I think I saw a boat, and then when she went up, she said, "Yep, there is a boat out there." So we waved. We had an oar, and we were waving that in the air, and they saw us finally. And it was a sports fisherman, and they had 2 couples that they had been out fishing. And luckily they were fishermen because they had sharp eyes. And they spotted us, got us on board the boat, and got her all wrapped up because she was just shaking like a leaf. The shock and the hypothermia was really bad on her. And they had a full chest of beer, so I could get a cold beer. And we headed for shore. And We really, we suffered really badly. Both of us had second and third degree burns. In fact, it had been difficult to swim because we had like flaps of skin were hanging loose. It was pretty ugly.
And you had an oar to push the sharks off with.
So
That's
they
good.
got us to shore. We went to a clinic. They fixed us up. They sent us down 40 miles south to Cabo to a hospital. The hospital worked on us for a couple days, taking care of our burns mainly. They thought she had pneumonia, but they gave her enough to prevent it. And then the local American embassy picked us up and took us to the airport because we didn't have passports. We didn't have anything. We had lost everything. All we had was shorts. First, they took us to a Walmart so we could get some clothes so we'd be presentable on an airplane. And then they put us on an airplane and gave us a letter that said that we didn't need passports. We were okay. They vetted us. A new word these days, right? Everybody's getting vetted. They vetted us, sent us back, and that's when I called you when we got here, and I said I need a burn specialist badly, and you fortunately got.
We pulled all.
You had
all the
all the
stops
right
out.
people waiting for me, and after 4 days in the hospital, my leg was pretty bad. It was the whole length of my leg was third degree burn, but it healed well. It healed well, and here I am.
Well, Ed, thank you for this wonderful story about what retirement is like, what I have to look forward to. Ventura, really, give back, go to other countries, visit their schools, learn how to relax, get your life in balance. We need work and play and matters to the spirit and the family, of all of which Ed had. And we really look forward, now that we have Ed back, we're to be re-entering some of our scientific experiments as well. So Ventura, it's time for you to get moving.
Returning from the bay, it had been a nice day. They went motoring on. Who knew something was wrong? It was a good ship and crew. They would have to know what to do when the fire erupted from the cabin. The sailboat was the pride of the American side, improved in function each summer. As cruisers go, it was good to sail slow, a two-man crew and a good captain well seasoned. The Sandpiper legend lives on from the Channel Islands on down to the bay they call Bolindra. The Sea of Cortez, it said, hates to give up near dead when the skies of May turn smoky.